and welcome along to the Assist, sponsored by Free Super Tips. I'm Tom McGarry, once again standing in for Warren Ashurst, and I'm joined this week by top Racing Post tipsters Mark Langdon and Dan Childs. After a busy midweek of European action, we're getting ready for another crucial weekend in the Premier League and across the EFL. But before we get our teeth back into the domestic action, let's first have a look back on what we saw in the Champions League during the week. It really was a case of contrasting fortunes for the two Premier League teams involved. For Arsenal, what a performance and result it was in beating Real Madrid by 3-0 at the Emirates on Tuesday, not least thanks to the free kick expertise of Declan Rice. Then on Wednesday, Aston Villa put in a decent account of themselves away to Paris Saint-Germain, but ultimately lost by 3-1, meaning they've got a mountain to climb heading into next week's second leg at Villa Park. There were also victories for Inter Milan away at Bayern Munich and Barcelona, who comprehensively got the better of Borussia Dortmund. But Mark, we'll start with you. Really, the story, certainly from a Premier League perspective, was that performance and result for Arsenal on Tuesday night.
I don't think there were many people that would have predicted a 3-0 win for Arsenal. Home advantage, I think, is worth a fair bit at this stage of the competition. So, Arsenal would have felt like they needed to get a lead to take to the Bernabeu, but to destroy Real Madrid 3-0, that doesn't happen too often. Even if you outplay Real Madrid, they find a way to score and they find a way to stay in the game. But no, it's a monumental effort in all departments. Obviously, Declan Rice with the as you mentioned there, Tom, with the free kick goals, and you were wondering where the goals would come from with Arsenal. I probably didn't have that down on our bingo card. Declan Rice to do that, but a brilliant performance. Against a Real Madrid team that has looked vulnerable at times this season, but usually saves their best for the Champions League. But there was the one or two moments from Madrid, but Arsenal fully deserved to run out comfortable winners.
Yeah, Dan, Arsenal were fantastic on Tuesday. Villa were okay in Paris the following night, but just what a sucker punch is that third goal late in the piece from Nuno Mendes that has given PSG a 2-goal cushion to take into the second leg.
Yeah, I think that was a killer blow, that goal at the end there. I thought Villa, they were quite composed at times, and it's a real tough task, as we've seen with Liverpool, when they went there and were... Villa were battered on the shot count, but I think Liverpool probably fared even worse on that metric and still come away with that extraordinary victory. Villa's goal, I thought, was extremely well worked and put them in a great position. But PSG's two strikes were worldies, weren't they? Absolutely brilliant goals, and the composure Mendes showed as well. For his finish for the third, and you just saw Villa slump there. I thought at 2-1, however, PSG obviously a very impressive side, but we did see when they went to Anfield that it was a much more even game and Liverpool created chances against them. I could see that at Villa Park with Villa, having a lot more of the game in the second leg. I thought 2-1 would have been a decent result for them if they'd lost the game 2-1. Now, to have to beat PSG by 2 goals just to get to a penalty shootout, and we've all seen how good Donnarumma is in at saving penalties as well. So it's a real tough arse now for Villa.
Yeah, it's going to be tough for Villa to make it through to the semi-finals. Arsenal, though, look well placed, even though it's Real Madrid in the Champions League, so you can never fully discount the defending champions. That's the Champions League action, though, from the week. We're going to turn our focus to the Premier League action this weekend. The big match comes on Sunday at 4:30 from St James's Park, where Newcastle play host to Manchester United. Newcastle flying still off the back of their Carabao Cup victory, and of course, they look well placed to qualify for next season's Champions League. For Manchester United, we're recording this before their Europa League clash with Lyon, but their last domestic game, the less said about that, the better, really. The dull Manchester United, the Manchester derby of last weekend. Newcastle are 7-10 favourites to win this game. The draw is available at 31-10. Manchester United outsiders at 7-2. And Mark, we'll start with you. This game brings back memories of title challenges from the mid to late 90s, the battles between Keegan and Ferguson off the pitch and the likes of Shearer and Keane on it. But coming into this game at Newcastle, all the momentum is with them.
Yeah, Manchester United would love to get back to those days, wouldn't they? Really, those that you mentioned there, Ferguson and Roy Keane. This Manchester United team is well off that. I think realistically, Manchester United don't really care about this game. They shouldn't anyway. I think Ruben Amorim will have to say all of the right things in the press conference, but the Lyon sort of two-legged tie is going to be much more important to United's future than what the Newcastle game is. But yeah, you're right. Newcastle sort of really going well at the moment. Had that stroll against Leicester in the Premier League. They've sort of got the monkey off their back really in terms of winning the trophy. And finally ending that hoodoo. I think there's now 5 spots available, aren't they, guaranteed for the Premier League in terms of sort of qualifying for next season's Champions League. And Newcastle are really going to fancy their chances of securing a top 5 finish. And if they do that, it's been a brilliant season. If they get Champions League and win a trophy, I don't think you could have asked for much more really from Eddie Howe.
No, certainly not. That would be a fantastic season from Newcastle's point of view. Dan, the Magpies beat Manchester United at Old Trafford earlier in the season by 2-0, so they're going for the league double. And it's 5 years since Manchester United won at St James's Park, so it's a bit of an uphill task that Ruben Amorim's side are facing.
Yeah, and I wouldn't mind, assuming that each of those last times that they've been there, they wouldn't have been going there 15 points, lower in the table, having played a game more as well. And I think Newcastle have responded really well to winning the cup. As a Spurs fan, I remember Spurs when we last won a trophy many moons ago under one day Ramos when we won a trophy. That there was a complete collapse after that at the end of the season. Could have finished, in a decent league position. And it all fell apart. Newcastle have had the euphoria, very similar euphoria to Spurs had, when they won the League Cup. And the impressive thing is that they've been professional and kicked on again. The Brentford game was a banana skin. Brentford, a tough team to beat, won that game. Then got the easy win at Leicester. They've been going a bit under the radar, I think, in the league because they've had these games in hand and they've been outside of those top positions. All of a sudden now, they're in there and with a game in hand, they win the game in hand. They've actually got a nice 4-point cushion to 6th place. So having a great season. And I agree with Mark for Man United. All their focus, they're not going to admit it, but it's all going to be on the Lyon game. So that makes this weekend very difficult for them.
Yeah, it looks like it's going to be really hard to stop Newcastle on Sunday. Is that what we're both looking at? We're both thinking that Newcastle should go on to win this game?
Yeah, I think so, Tom. Yeah, I think so, Tom. But Newcastle won 4 in a row. They are sniffing that Champions League spot. I think it is reflected in the prices that Manchester United, that is, will be resting some players. So I've gone for Newcastle to win and under 3.5 goals to try to get a bit more juice out of the price. If you look at Manchester United, at least defensively, they have tightened up, only conceded 2 Premier League goals since the start of March, during which time they've played Arsenal, City and Forest. But they haven't obviously had such a important Europa League games as what they've got coming up. So I think Newcastle will win and Manchester United can keep it respectable enough. But a low scoring home win.
Yeah, maybe not quite the Philip Albert moment and a 5-0 Newcastle win of a bygone era. But Danny, are you have a similar thinking regarding that?
Yeah, I don't think it'll be an absolute battering, but I do actually feel it'll be quite a comfortable home win. I mean, Newcastle are just so focused now, I think, on getting this Champions League spot. They're always generally strong at home anyway. And you like I say, 15 points clear with a game in hand. That's potentially 18 points clear playing at home. For me, even before you look into the United's Europa League commitments, 8 to 11, I think might have tightened up a little bit more, but still that price to me reflects a team reasonably accurately that is potentially 18 points better in the table. So I think with the additional distraction of United being in the in the Europa League, I think it'll be probably a much changed team for United. And I think Newcastle are a pretty solid bet, even at the prices that are there. So Newcastle to win for me.
Yeah, it could be a pretty good afternoon then for Newcastle on Sunday. Moving on to the rest of the Premier League action, and the weekend gets underway with the 12:30 kickoff on Saturday. Manchester City, another of those sides pushing for Champions League qualification. They're at home against in-form Crystal Palace. City 8-15 to win this game. The draw 15-4. Palace available at 9-2. Dan, Palace have caused problems for Manchester City in the not too distant past, and this could be quite an entertaining game, really, between an informed Palace side and a City team that there's probably still a lot of questions about.
Yeah, this is a tricky one for me because I've mentioned previously that City, had shown some more positive signs, moving into 2025, and actually they kind of seem to be going backwards again, recently with their performances. And if Palace should have been at full strength, I would have been tempted to take City on actually, but it's coming out of that derby game, whether you call it a derby or not, against Brighton last weekend, you've got Gurhey suspended now. Lacroix got a head injury. I think he's going through a concussion protocol. So to lose two of your main defenders, even going away to a City side without Haaland, I think is a big blow and probably too much for Palace to get a result. Now, I think Palace are carrying a lot of threats at the moment going forward. You've got Wharton back that adds to their creativity. Sarr having a really good season. Mateta's having an excellent season. Eze, they've got loads of attacking threats. So I can see Palace scoring, but I think that weakened defence will be too exposed. So I'm going to go with Man City to win and both teams to score.
Dan fancies Manchester City to win. Maybe an entertaining game. Mark, how do you see it panning out? Do you think Palace have a chance at the Etihad?
I do. Particularly Gahey, being suspended is a big blow. I think that is countered by Haaland's absence. And if you look at Glasner, I think he is somebody that finds solutions. He's done it, ever since he arrived. Really at the club, he's when they've had problems, he's found a way around it. So I'd back him to come up with something that works for Crystal Palace to sort of nullify that threat of Man City. I'm going to go for Crystal Palace +1 on the Asian handicap. So your bet is a winner if Crystal Palace draw or win the game. If City win by 1, it's stake returned, and then if City win by 2 or more, your bet's a loser. But I think it's a brave punter that backs City to win by sort of 2 goals or more in sort of any Premier League game at the moment, maybe apart from Leicester.
Yeah, speaking of Leicester, we're going to move on to them very shortly because there's 3 o'clock kickoffs on Saturday, and the Foxes are involved in one of those. They're heading to the Amex to take on Brighton. Brighton are 2-7 to win this game. The draw's 5-1. Leicester 17-2 outsiders. Brighton have struggled a bit since losing that FA Cup quarter-final to Nottingham Forest on penalties against a Leicester side, Mark, who I'd probably argue, even including Southampton, certainly on current form, Leicester are probably the worst team in the Premier League. So Brighton have got to fancy their chances, really, of returning to winning ways. Yeah,
I'm surprised you didn't go for the Amex banker line, really, Tom, here for Brighton. But look, Leicester have lost 15 of their last 16 Premier League games. I mean, they were 2-0 down inside 10 minutes against Newcastle at home, or sort of shortly after 10 minutes on Monday. I'm amazed Ruud van Nistelrooy has not been sacked. I can't believe he's still there. Really, he's causing chaos with the fans who absolutely hate him. He's fallen out with players, including Harry Winks. I'm assuming Leicester just think, well, we're getting relegated, so we don't want to pay the compo, and then we'll just bring in a new guy in the summer. I would say, just for Leicester and for Ipswich, I think finishing 18th is going to be important because you never know what's going to happen with Man City. 115 charges against them at the moment. What if they were to get relegated or docked a season's worth of points? You might be able to stay up if you finish 18th. So I do think that I'm not sure the dressing room will sort of feel like that, but they should be playing to finish 18th if they've got any sense. But for this game, I'm going Brighton -1. Of those sort of 15 games that Leicester have lost, 13 of them were by at least 2 goals. So they're not even being competitive in most of these games.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, they concede goals, Dan Leicester. They can't score either. That's been well documented. Can you make any kind of case for them heading to the Amex?
Not really. No, I don't think they've got the memo, have they, about this? Potential of 18th place, because they just don't play to look like playing with any desire at all. At least when you watch Ipswich play, they for example, one of their competitors down there, they do show a bit of fight, don't they, and try and get after teams. But no, I think Brighton need a reset, don't they? They got knocked out of the FA Cup. The league losses at home to Villa, 3-0, and obviously losing the game to Palace is always going to be tough, but they've had a full week to get over that. They're still, when all's cut and dry, they're still in with a decent chance of pushing for a European qualification spot. So I think they'll kind of reset here. I'm not sure it'll be a massive margin of victory. I just think that when you've been on a poor run like Brighton, they're just going to be happy to get the job done, get the 3 points. Leicester, funny enough, I wouldn't say more competitive performances, but away from home, they have been being able to keep the score down. 2-0 loss at West Ham, 1-0 loss at Chelsea, 2-0 loss away to Man City. So I can see a similar sort of low-scoring defeat without Leicester getting on the score sheet here. So I'm going to go with Brighton to win and under 3.5 goals. I think is a shade of odds against.
Yeah, probably quite a comfortable victory for Brighton then in that game. Pretty hard to call the next game, though, on the list. Nottingham Forest against Everton, also a 3 o'clock kickoff on Saturday. We know all about Forest flying in third position. They're 11-10 to win this game. The draw 23-10. Everton 27-10. Drew with Arsenal last weekend. Very hard to beat under David Moyes. Dan, how do you see this one playing out?
I think this is a tough fixture for Forest. I mean, they've got themselves into an amazing position, but you can almost sort of sense the nerves a little bit now. I think they're kind of realising where they are. I mean, the last weekend, I thought the Man United game that they won, though, it was quite nervy, wasn't it? Harry Maguire nearly got the late leveller for United, who kind of bossed the shot count in that game. Then they've gone to Villa. Villa made 8 changes. Villa have won that game, and while they're in a great position, I just think Everton, they've lost 1 in the last 11 Premier League games. That was the 1-0 loss at Liverpool, where they were still very competitive. Better, hitting the post with a 1-on-1. So they're not the team you want to be facing at the moment when in a game that you probably feel that you need to be targeting a win. So I think it's going to be a very tight, low-scoring game. That brings the draw into play. Going to go with a draw.
Yeah, Mark, Forest have been really good at home all season, but this does look a potential banana skin on paper. Everton, a really difficult team to beat.
Yeah, I'm going for the draw as well. I think Forest are at their best when they're able to counter-attack, and the goal against United was a prime example of that when Elanga, sort of covered the whole length of the pitch, and they get players forward quickly, but they also like to defend in numbers, and that's not going to be possible really to counter-attack against an Everton team that play in a very similar way. Everton have drawn 6 of their last 8, and I just don't see them getting sort of done on the counter like maybe other teams have, sort of fallen into that trap against Forest. So a point wouldn't be a disaster in terms of trying to qualify for the Champions League. They'd like the 3, but they might fall short of that.
Draw could be the order of the day then at the City Ground. The final 3 o'clock kickoff on Saturday takes us to St Mary's. Southampton against Aston Villa. Saints relegated after a defeat to Tottenham last weekend, parted ways soon after with Ivan Juric. All the focus really for them is on avoiding setting the new low for Premier League points for a season. They still need a couple more to surpass Derby's total from the 2007 to 08 campaign for Villa. So as the question is all about how they can respond to their midweek disappointment in the Champions League with another European game to come a few days after this one. Southampton are 5-1 to win the game. The draw's 16-5. Villa heavy favourites at 11-20. I suppose, Mark, under normal circumstances, you just think this is an away win easy for Aston Villa, but with the caveats I've mentioned, it might not quite be as easy.
Yeah, you always sort of wonder whether a new manager can just get something different out of a team. And Rusk took charge of the Fulham game when Southampton got a 0-0 at Craven Cottage before Juric came in. Villa, I expect to rest players. It was a very difficult game for them. They played a lot of the match without the ball in Paris on Wednesday. But even saying all of that, I'm still going to go for Aston Villa to win. Aston Villa to win and over 2.5 goals at 6-5 is the way I was looking for it. Their last 5 games have all gone overs. 7 wins in a row before the PSG game. And let's face it, Southampton are not PSG.
No, not quite. No. Southampton really, really struggling in every department you look at, Dan. But is there any hope? This is a good time potentially to be playing Aston Villa. Can you make a case for the Saints getting anything potentially from the match?
It's not easy to make a case, but I'm going to make a case because I just think that I'm uncomfortable with Villa at the price that they are. So I'm going to take them on. I'm going to go Southampton or draw, double chance. I think that, as bad as they've been this season, their squad of players probably, if they were better organised, probably should have done a bit better and been a bit more competitive. There's been a few little more signs of that recently, even before the relegation. The draw against Crystal Palace, the 1-1. They were a bit more competitive, I thought, in the game away to Spurs as well, the 3-1. I mean, on shots and XG, it wasn't, a huge difference. Spurs XG suddenly went a lot ahead with the late penalty. But there's just a few signs there, and you've got Russ coming in, may make, as Mark said, may make a bit of an impact. So I'm going to just take a bit of a leap and back Southampton to avoid defeat.
I would just say on Southampton, because I watched the game at Spurs last week. They were dreadful in the first half, but actually in the second half, there might have been some of that Tottenham just sort of sitting back and thinking about Thursday in the Europa League. But second half, they definitely improved and didn't look like a basket case.
They've got some exciting players, haven't they? I mean, Tyler Dibbling, we've mentioned. Kamaldeen Sulemana was good in that game as well against Spurs in this second half. So maybe unlike Leicester, they have a bit of an attacking threat. So that could stand them in good stead heading into this game and maybe for the remaining weeks of the season. The 5:30 kickoff in the Premier League on Saturday. Arsenal against Brentford. Arsenal, like Villa, playing this game in between their 2 Champions League quarter-final legs. They're 3-5 to get the 3 points, though, at the Emirates Stadium. The draw 10-3. Brentford 4-1. Now, the Bees, Mark, have been in good form away from home over recent weeks. And again, is this a potentially good time to be facing Arsenal?
Oh, it's a great time to be playing Arsenal. I would imagine. If Mikel Arteta's got any sense, he just rests everyone and just gives everything for that Real Madrid game because it's not over against Real Madrid. We sort of spoke at the top of the show about what a brilliant result it was. If Real Madrid are winning at half time, like that game can suddenly become nervous. The Bernabeu is like probably nowhere else in Europe once it gets going. So I think Arteta needs to focus still on that Real Madrid game. I think he will do that, judging by the team he picked at Everton last week, which was sort of mix and match sort of side. I'm going to go for under 2.5 goals. Arsenal are rotating at the moment. 6 of the last 7 in the Premier League for them have been unders. I mean, it doesn't seem to matter who plays in defence. They're still sort of relatively well organised. Just like who scores the goals, particularly if they do rotate.
I suppose they just need to win a free kick in and around the penalty area, and Declan Rice can just step up and put one in the top corner. Who really knew he had that in his locker? But yeah, Dan, it could be a slightly rotated Arsenal side. Does that give Brentford more of an opportunity than they perhaps normally would?
Yeah, I agree with pretty much everything Mark said there. I think it'll be a heavily rotated team as well. I think Rice and Saka look like they might come off with picked up a couple of knocks as well in the Real Madrid game. So I think they'll certainly be 2 of the players that are at the very least dropped to the bench. And Brentford they kind of relish these big games, didn't they? They got a good 0-0 draw at home to Chelsea, and Chelsea was going into that game really, needing and pushing for 3 points for Champions League qualification. That shows another example of how stubborn they can be, Brentford, and they carry a hell of a threat going forward as well. So another very solid season for Brentford. As Mark mentioned, a great time for them to play Arsenal, and I can see him picking a result up. I'm going to go with the draw. Looks overpriced to me.
Yeah, it could be a decent afternoon. It's stroke evening for Brentford at the Emirates. On Sunday, we get underway with 3 matches at 2:00. We'll begin with the game at Stamford Bridge, Chelsea against Ipswich. Chelsea will be going into that one after facing Legia Warsaw on Thursday in the first leg of their Conference League quarter-final. They're 3-10 to win the game. The draw 11-2. Ipswich off the back of last week's defeat to Wolves. They're 13-2 to win the game. That really was a killer blow for Ipswich, that loss last weekend, Dan. And this is going to be a difficult trip. They did beat Chelsea in the reverse fixture at Portman Road, but can you give them any chance of doing the double?
No, not really. I think what I would say is I think, as I mentioned earlier in the show, I think they'll keep trying. I think they'll keep trying to attack teams and going for it. Their approach has been quite refreshing, in that respect. Clearly, that they've got an advantage over certainly Leicester, and that they've got Liam Delap up front, who carries a big threat for them. But I think their general attitude is very positive, and I think they'll try and win the game. I don't think that, even though from outside the club, everyone's looking at it thinking they're down. I think they will go there and try and win the game. And I think they could pay a price for that. I think Chelsea, when teams come onto them, are almost more dangerous at times with their counter-attacking threats. For them, I think qualifying for the Champions League is probably arguably a bigger deal than even winning the Conference League, and they continue to rotate for the Conference League game. It's not like Man United and Spurs where they're focusing on the European match. I think they'll probably be less strong with their starting lineup against Legia Warsaw than they are for the game against Ipswich. So I think they'll be really focused on getting a result, and I think they'll win it in a high-scoring game. Wouldn't surprise me if Ipswich get a goal, but Chelsea and over 2.5 goals appeals to me at a shade of odds on.
Yeah, Chelsea, chalk and cheese at the moment, good at home, struggling away. And Mark, as Dan says, unlike the other Premier League teams involved in Europe at the moment, they can afford to rotate in the Conference League and still put out a strong team in the Premier League that probably should be capable of getting the better of Ipswich.
Yeah, I would have thought so. I'm going to go for Cole Palmer to score the first goal. No goal in 12 he's Cold Palmer now, isn't he, rather than Cole Palmer? But even his shot volume has remained decent throughout this sort of entire time, really. So it's not for the want of trying. Even he was substitute against Brentford last weekend. He only got half an hour and he still had 3 shots. So he's still shooting a lot. He missed a penalty recently that might have dented his confidence, but he looks Chelsea's most likely avenue and most reliable sort of goal scoring threat. So I'd sort of go for him in a game where not much stood out.
Yeah, Chelsea should win then, and it could be a return to form for Cole Palmer. One of the other 2:00 kickoffs comes from Anfield. Liverpool against West Ham. Liverpool looking to bounce back from their defeat at Fulham last weekend. 1-3, heavy favourites to win this game. The draw 19-4. West Ham 7-1. Mark, on paper, this looks like the ideal opportunity for Liverpool to return to winning ways. I must admit, I'm finding it quite hard to gauge exactly what West Ham are all about under Graham Potter.
Well, I watched the West Ham v Bournemouth game on Saturday, and apart from 15-minute spell just after half time when they got their 2 goals, they won't be the only team that gets outplayed by Bournemouth. But I thought Bournemouth were the better side and quite comfortably the better team, really. So plenty for Potter to do in the summer. I think it was obviously a team that David Mills, I don't know who he is, David Moyes had built, and Potter plays very different football, and it will take time, I think, for him to shape the squad how he wants to. Like Souček was playing, looked like the number 10 position in that first half against Bournemouth last week. I don't think he's suited to that role. I wouldn't expect to see him play there too often. The one thing that Potter has done, and the Bournemouth game was maybe one of the sort of rare examples where it didn't work. I think he's tightened them up at the back, and Moyes was traditionally good at that. Lopetegui, sort of that man in the middle that didn't really seem to have a style of playing, and that caused them problems. But if you look at West Ham's away games, 10 of the 15 have been under 2.5 goals. So I'm going to go for Liverpool to win and under 3.5 goals. This is harder than an average game. I do think as well with Liverpool that they are maybe just got a slight dent in confidence. And Dan was mentioning it earlier with Brighton, where if you've not been on a great run, you just want to win, and it doesn't have to be swashbuckling. And so, Liverpool to win and under 3.5.
Yeah, Liverpool might need to grind it out just to try and rediscover a bit of that swagger. I suppose it's hard, Dan, when it looks like they're going to win the Premier League title to all intensive purposes, but they're out of all the other cup competitions. So just finding that regularity and that flow in your game, it's quite difficult.
Yeah, I mean, and everybody, look, they will win the Premier League title, but within their camp, they're going to be still thinking we've still got to pick these points up, and that does bring a little bit of pressure in itself. I mean, if they were to not to do it, it would be one of the biggest collapses of all time. So there's going to be pressure. I'm sure they'll do it, but I agree with Mark. I don't think it's going to be swashbuckling at the moment. Maybe as they're getting close to the finishing line, it could be more like that. But since that was huge, two huge blows, wasn't it, in succession to be knocked out of the Champions League and lose the League Cup final. Since then, they've had a sketchy 1-0 win at home to Everton and the 3-2 loss at Fulham. So there's issues there, issues with players' contracts that they're negotiating with ongoing at the moment. The likes of Salah and Van Dijk. So I wouldn't expect them to be anywhere near their best. But West Ham, I agree with Mark. They're almost looking to kind of next season. I think at the moment he's experimenting with different players in different positions. Don't think we're going to see the best of them until next season. But I think a very similar argument. I think the lowest scoring Liverpool win. I'm going to play ultra safe though and go Liverpool and under 4.5 goals, which I think is around about 3 to 4.
It may not be a classic at Anfield, certainly from a neutral perspective. The final 2:00 kickoff on Sunday comes from Molineux. It's Wolves against Tottenham. Rejuvenated Wolves on a fantastic run of form, pushing towards safety now. That victory over Ipswich last weekend against a Tottenham side who, like we've spoke about with Manchester United, Chelsea, Arsenal, Aston Villa, coming into this game in the midst of a European quarter-final battle. This is in between the two ties, the two legs, against Eintracht Frankfurt. Wolves are 6-5 to win the game. The draw 13-5. Tottenham 21-10. Dan, tricky game this for Spurs playing Wolves, who are flying at the moment.
It's a tricky game, yeah. I think it's reflected in the prices. Spurs, I'm sure, make a lot of changes, but also, Spurs have got a much stronger squad than they had, a couple of months ago. So, even if you're making 11 changes, a lot of the players coming in are still of a decent standard. So I think that's enough. With Spurs making changes reflected in the price there, I wouldn't be piling into Wolves at those odds. So they have got Matheus Cunha coming back, which is a big boost from his 4-match ban. During his suspension, though, Strand Larsen has really come to the fore, hasn't he? He's got 4 goals in his last 3 games. I looked at his price to score the first goal. I mean, he's going to be full of confidence. He's 13-2 to score the first goal. I mean, he's into double figures now for the season, kind of gone a bit under the radar. And I think that's overpriced for him to get the first goal here.
Yeah, Jurgen Strand Larsen has been playing well in the absence of Matheus Cunha. Mark, I mean, there's potentially a scenario, given how well Wolves have done in recent weeks, that Cunha might not necessarily come back into the starting 11.
I think Pereira should keep him on the bench. Disgraceful behaviour. Could have cost Wolves their Premier League place, really, with that sort of latest red card. 4-match suspension. His teammates have dug him out of the hole. They've dug Wolves out of that hole, and I don't think he deserves to come straight back in. I mean, he's going to be off in the summer anyway, isn't he? Well, more than likely. So I think Pereira, if you're thinking about the sort of longer term, you don't need to chuck Cunha straight back in. I think Wolves will win this game. I sort of think that odds against, you might even be able to get a bit of 13-10 if you shop around. Looks fair enough to me. Spurs have got this massive doubleheader against Eintracht Frankfurt, and if you look at the stats on points since Pereira came into Wolves, they've actually taken more points than Tottenham this season. So in sort of the few months he's been there. So I think Wolves are fair enough.
It could be another good afternoon then for Wolves. The final Premier League match of the weekend. You have to wait for that until Monday night, 8:00 kickoff. Bournemouth against Fulham. Two sides still just about in the race for European qualification. Maybe not Champions League, but you could get Europa League or Conference League. Bournemouth are 6-5 to win this game on home soil. The draw 5-2. Fulham 9-4. Mark, for me, this is quite an attractive looking game on paper.
Should be a decent Monday night, certainly more competitive than what was served up on Monday Night Football sort of earlier on this week. Me and Dan disagree on this game, so I'm going to give the reason why I fancy Bournemouth and then I'll hand over to Dan why he doesn't. I'm going purely really here on XG. If you have a look at the expected goal difference this season, Fulham a 0.16, which is sort of mid-table-ish really, a little bit above mid-table. Bournemouth a 0.53, and should be on sort of more Champions League pace really than where they are in the table. They don't win as many games as their football perhaps deserves, but even Ilson is back fit, looks fully firing now, and I would just take them to beat a Fulham side that, I don't know, some weeks they're good and some weeks they're not, and I think Bournemouth's consistency of play is what attracts me here, because even when they don't win, they tend to play well.
Okay, Dan, Mark's made the case for Bournemouth. Can you make the Fulham argument?
Yeah, I just think that maybe Bournemouth have not got. I mean, I'll excuse Evan Nilsson here because he's finished in the last few weeks has been exceptional, but maybe a lot of their players are just not, need a lot of shots. Semenyo, but it comes to mind, there's a lot of shots, doesn't actually, score as many goals perhaps as he should. I think there's still a fitness doubt over Cliver, I think, who's a key player for them. And it's no winning 6 now Premier League games. Now some of them games they played very, very well. The Spurs 2-2 they should have won. The West Ham 2-2 they should have won. But the last 2 home Premier League games they've lost to Brentford and Ipswich. Fulham are a better side, I would argue, than both of those two. Got a massive boost off the 3-2 win home to Liverpool. Still well in the hunt for Euro qualification. I'm gonna take them on the draw no bet. Fulham for me.
Okay, slight disagreement then on the final Premier League match of the weekend. Next up, though, we're going to move on to the EFL.
Do you want football free bets? All the best offers from your favourite bookmakers can be found in one place. Check out racingpost.com/free-bets to find out more. Racing Post, stay ahead of the field.
Okay, so this week's EFL match in focus comes from the Championship and 2 sides on the periphery of the top 6 battle at the moment. It's West Brom against Watford. It kicks off at 3 o'clock on Saturday. West Brom are about 8-11 to win the game. The draw 27-10. Watford 15-4. The Baggies have had a disappointing run of late. They've dropped out of the top 6, having been there for much of the season. Watford got an important victory against Hull in the week to potentially move themselves back into the playoff mix. Dan, these 2 sides, they'll want to be in the top 6 come the end of the season. So this is a really important game.
It's an important game. I think probably both will miss out, but I think the team that's far more likely to make it will be West Brom. I just think that even though they've been on a bad run, 3 losses in a row, 5 games without a win, they've got the firepower to put a run together. I looked at their bench. They lost a big game for them. They lost an injury time goal from Bristol City in the 2-1 midweek defeat. I mean, you've got players coming off the bench for them. You've got Fellows, DK, Mikey Johnson, Grady Diangana coming off the bench. You've got a hell of a lot. Will Lancashire, I think, was an unused substitute. They've got a hell of a lot of firepower, West Brom. And I still think there's a chance that could get them on a winning run. Whether it would be enough, we'll have to wait and see. I was at the Watford game, Watford against Hull in the week. It was a pretty dire match. Watford, they've got a couple of key players, attacking players, Kwadwo Bar and Georgie Chakvatadze, who are both out for the season. And without those two, there's very, very little, in attacking sense. They managed to scrape a 1-0 win. Moussa Sissoko, fantastic finish, got them the win against Hull. But no, they've been pretty ordinary, really, in 2025. Going to West Brom, as I said, with all that firepower that West Brom have got, I just think they'll get the result here. Both teams, as you mentioned, Tom, have got a push for the win. I don't see it being a draw, but West Brom with that firepower, they look value to me at a shade of odds on.
Yeah, I suppose for the loser, they'd probably be out of the top 6 mix. For Winnie, you kind of mentioned that you probably think both teams will ultimately miss out on the top 6.
Yeah, and what I would add as well, I think both of them would have had their heads in their hands at the late goal for Coventry against Portsmouth last night, because that stretched the gap. If that had finished in a draw, the gap from West Brom to the playoffs would have been 3 points, and from Watford to the playoffs would have been 4 points. Now it's 5 and 6. So that is at this stage of the season with 5 to go, it's just such a massive difference, and I think that could kill them there. I mean, Coventry, I think, needed that win, and I'd fancy them to finish in the top 6.
There are going to be fans of Doncaster and Wimbledon going absolutely bonkers that we haven't chosen that as the game of the weekend. Don't worry, Donny and Wimbledon fans, I'm with you. I can't believe we haven't chosen that one. I'll be watching that at 12:30. Massive game in League Two, particularly for Doncaster promotion backers, i.e. me.
I watched Doncaster win 3-0 against Carlisle a couple of weeks ago, and I can't say because Carlisle was so poor that Doncaster were impressive, but a good result. And yeah, they're one of the sides very much in the automatic promotion mix in League Two, which, as ever, is very, very competitive and set to go down to the wire. We'll move on to the EFL selections then. Danny, the three best bets you picked out from across the division. I think there's a very much a League One focus to these this week. Where have you gone for your first selection?
I've got to apologise to Doncaster fans because all my three picks are in League One. I'm completely ignoring League Two. I'm going to start off with big game for Wrexham away to Wigan in League One. Wrexham have got a 3-point lead over Wycombe. Wycombe won their midweek match, got a great 1-0 win away to Huddersfield to kind of keep the pressure up on Wrexham. That was their game in hand, cut the Wrexham's lead over them from 6 points to 3. But I can see Wrexham responding there. I mean, Wigan are a side. Ryan Lowe's gone in there as a manager. He seems to be just focusing on tightening them up at the back. They went with a blanket defence away to Leyton Orient last weekend, dug out a 0-0 draw, but they were absolutely battered on the shot stats. Then they got a 1-1 draw, Wigan, away to injury hit Exeter on the Tuesday, but they're not playing that well at the moment. Wigan, Taylor Asgard, who was January sailed to Luton, he was their best player, and they've struggled a bit since then. So Wrexham, for me, with their power that they've got and a very solid defence, will go there and get the win. Following on from that, I just mentioned Exeter. With the injuries they got at the moment, they're going away to Bristol Rovers. I don't see Bristol Rovers to win this game. They're a shade of odds on the draw no bet. Now, Bristol Rovers have lost their last 5 games, but bear with me. The last 2 games, they've had a 2-1 loss home to Birmingham, where they played really well in that game. Looked a very even game on the stats and the match reports. Then they've lost 1-0 away to Bolton. Again, have looked a very even game as well. So Bristol Rovers are finding something at the moment, even if it's not getting the results. At home, they are generally a lot better. 9 of their 12 wins have come at home. And I think they'll get a home win against Exeter, who have got injuries, as I mentioned, and only 1 win in their last 6 games. Finishing off, going to go with Stockport to win at home to Rotherham. Stockport, if Wrexham and Wycombe, struggle and make enough mistakes, Stockport are going to be thinking, they can maybe capitalise and sneak into the top 2. They're certainly pushing. They've won their last 3 matches, including a 3-0 win at home to Stevenage and a 2-0 victory away to Exeter last weekend. Had a free midweek, which is something that Rotherham haven't had. They won 1-0 away to Bolton. That was their 3rd win in a row, Rotherham, under Matt Hampshire, who's gone in as interim manager after Steve Evans was sacked. And he's doing a fantastic job. But the shot stats for that game were incredible. It's 36-5 in favour of Bolton. I think Bolton had over 60 touches in the opposition box. So, I mean, how they didn't win that game, is incredible, really. He did mention Hampshire that he worries that maybe they could blow up, were his words, at the weekend. And Stockport, as I said, at home, going for that win to stay in the top 2 race. They're only a shade of odds on. I think that's a really good bet.
I watched that Bolton v Rotherham game, and the Rotherham keepers had the night of his life. It was an incredible defeat for Bolton. I'm still not sure how they lost the game.
The ultimate smash and grab there from Rotherham. So, I'll just run you through Dan's EFL picks, or we'll call them his League One picks for this week. He's going for Wrexham to beat Wigan, Bristol Rovers in the draw no bet market against Exeter, and Stockport to beat Rotherham, whose luck might run out at Edgeley Park. We'll move on now then to Mark Langdon's bet builder. Mark, you've looked at Manchester City against Crystal Palace this week.
Yeah, that's right, Tom. I think it's a difficult weekend in the Premier League because of the kind of European commitments and whether teams are focusing on the Premier League. So I've gone for a game where I think both teams will be, to use a sort of racing parlance, be off and trying to get points. So Man City against Palace, I'm going for under 3.5 goals. 5 of City's last 6 league games have gone under 3.5. And I think Pep Guardiola's really tried to tighten the team up since that Arsenal sort of humiliation, really, at the Emirates. Palace are missing a couple of defenders, but Glasner, who's been linked with a couple of kind of bigger jobs this week, I rate the job that he's doing at Selhurst, and I think he'll be able to come up with a solution to those absentees, particularly Gahey. I'm going to go for Munoz to have a shot in the game. He's had a shot in 9 of his last 11 matches, and still don't trust City down those flanks. I think you can get at them, and that sort of plays into the final leg of the bet builder. I'm going for Núñez, the sort of makeshift Man City right back, to have over 1.5 fouls. In 4 of his last 5 starts, he's had at least 2 fouls, and be up against Eze, which is, you know, one of the more difficult jobs really in the Premier League. So under 3.5 goals, Munoz shot, and Núñez to commit over 1.5 fouls, and that's about 5-1.
Decent value there, perhaps. And your prop shop, Mark, as well. You've dipped into the Championship for this one.
Yeah, I had eyes everywhere on Tuesday night. I was watching a little bit of Arsenal, Real Madrid. I had that Bolton v Rotherham game on. I was also watching Middlesbrough against Leeds, and Dan James caught the eye for me. You know, an erratic winger, I think it's fair to say. You know, he's all speed and you know, maybe just doesn't calm himself down enough when it comes to sort of the really big moments, but he has come up big for Leeds in the last couple of matches. I'm going to go for Dan James to have over 1.5 shots on target. He's had 2 in each of his last 2 away games at Luton and Middlesbrough. He's also having quite a lot of shots at the moment, 34 shots in his last 10 games. Massive boost for Leeds in midweek, not only winning a tough game at Middlesbrough, but you know, other results went their way as well. So fully expect them to beat Preston, and you know, Dan James to be at the heart of it. I would say to shop around because there's some big price differences over the sort of Dan James line, but you can get 11-4 over 1.5 shots on target as we speak. So that's where I'd be heading.
Watch out for Dan James at Ellen Road this weekend. We'll move on to the assist treble then, where myself, Mark and Dan both pick out a selection each. My one comes from League Two. Unfortunately, Doncaster and Wimbledon supporters have not gone towards that game. I've looked towards the bottom end of the division. It's a real big day, potentially a decisive day in the League Two relegation battle. The bottom 4 clubs are coming up against each other. 4th bottom Tranmere travel to 3rd bottom Accrington, whilst the bottom 2 Morecambe and Carlisle will meet. I've gone with Tranmere in the draw no bet market to win at Accrington, which is slightly odds on, but I think it's decent value. Tranmere looked like they were really struggling and heading towards relegation a few weeks ago, but they've turned their form completely around. Unfortunately, since parting ways with Nigel Adkins, yeah, they've been fantastic in recent weeks. They won away at Bradford, which is a fantastic result in a recent away fixture, and Accrington, they're the side that look like they're imploding. Them had some really poor results of late, and certainly supporters of Morecambe and Accrington will be perhaps targeting them to potentially leapfrog in the relegation battle. But I think Tranmere have more than enough momentum behind them to go on and win that game. Dan, we'll come to you next. Where are you going for your part of the treble?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Stockport to win that game against Rotherham. They're 4th in League One, still pushing to try and get higher if they can. You know, in the mix for a second successive promotion. 13 wins from their 20 home league games. Kept pushing on and done well despite losing Louis Barry. You know, it was fantastic for them on loan from Aston Villa earlier in the season. I just think they're going to be too strong for Rotherham, who've had that really tough game in them, even though they won it away to Bolton, and they've actually lost 10 of their League One away games.
And Mark will complete it as it's a bit of an EFL treble this week, isn't it? Because you've gone to League Two as well.
I've gone to the top of League Two, and it's still not Doncaster against Wimbledon. I'm going for Port Vale to beat Bromley. They're 4-5. Port Vale on a great run at the moment. 5 wins in 6, sort of propelled themselves up into the automatic promotion places. Massive win last week against Walsall. A game I was watching, sort of half an eye on that, and another half on the Leeds game. They're a very physical team, Port Vale, and they were able to deal with the physical threat that Walsall posed as well. I also think with Bromley, there's not much to play left for them to play for, and motivation in a couple of weeks' time. Port Vale will probably be 2s on to win this game because it'll be they've got to win, and Bromley just sort of playing out the season. I think from now, this is the time to back the teams that need to win because, like I said, in a couple of weeks the prices just disappeared. But the need for Vale, I think, is as big now as what it will be sort of over that Easter period and beyond. So yeah, the sort of motivation factor looked like the 4-5 was a big price to me.
I think last weekend Bromley tweeted out that they were officially mathematically safe. So that kind of further indicates that maybe they'll be slightly switched off, whilst Port Vale's need is certainly great. We'll round off then with Mark and Dan's naps for the weekend as well. Mark, we'll start with you.
I'm going to go for Wolves to beat Tottenham. Spurs have lost 5 of their last 6 away games. They've not scored in their last 3, and they've had under 1 for expected goals in all of them. So not creating much. I'm expecting a makeshift team as well, which is not going to help. And Wolves boosted by that come from behind victory and deserved victory as well. Ipswich last week can just make sure of safety at home in front of their own fans. So yeah, Wolves to beat Spurs.
And Dan, your nap, please.
Yeah, I've got similar thoughts with the need to win factors, and that plays into this nap. Bristol Rovers draw no bet home to Exeter. Bristol Rovers 5th from bottom in League One, 3 points above Burton, who've got a game in hand. So they're going to be thinking we really need to win this game. They are much stronger at home than our away. 33 of their 42 points Bristol Rovers have been at home. I mentioned the improved performances earlier in the show from them against Birmingham and Bolton, and they're playing an Exeter side who've got quite a lot of injuries and only taken 1 point from the last 2 games, and I think they're on 49 points, so very little to play for Exeter. Bristol Rovers draw no bet.
Okay, just to recap then, assist treble for the week. I've gone for Tranmere draw no bet against Accrington. Dan's gone for Stockport to beat Rotherham, and Mark's backing Port Vale to beat Bromley. And in terms of the naps, Mark's gone for Wolves to beat Spurs, and Dan is siding with Bristol Rovers in the draw no bet market against Exeter. All that remains then is for me to say goodbye from myself, Mark and Dan. Don't forget to like, subscribe and comment. Particularly interested to hear your thoughts on next week's Champions League quarterfinals ahead of Monday's Assist show. If you like golf as well, don't miss the Sweet Spot with Steve Palmer every Tuesday, and we will be back on Monday for the European show. In the meantime, enjoy your football this weekend, and please remember to gamble responsibly.